What's up, Nightwalkers? Hey, I've got another video for you guys today. I'm going to be going over the KVC Universal Bridge. The KVC bridge has been around for a while now. It began life as the RQE, the Red Queen Universal Bridge, and then Knight's Armament, or actually the Night Vision side of Knight's Armament acquired it, and that's why now it's called the KVC. Otherwise, it's the same exact bridge. The only differences between them is that the RQE will say RQE on them, and then the KVC say KVC. And so that's the primary difference between them. Now, what makes this bridge unique from the other ones out there in the market, potentially minus the Wilcox, because the Wilcox, dual bridge has some of the same features in terms of adjustments on it, is that it has a ton of features into it in terms of adjustability, and it has a high degree of engineering in terms of how this thing was designed and then the functionality of it. So as an example, it's an articulating bridge, which means that each one of these dovetail interfaces that your devices go into, they can articulate. So you can move them and rotate them up away from your eye on both sides, and they lock in place. So you see this little silver button here. Once you get it up to this position, you hear it click, it locks in, and now it's not going to come down on you. You got to push this button in to release it, and then bring it back down. Now, when it's all the way up, it still has a little bit of adjustability in terms of it could articulate up more. You're probably not going to really use that much, but it is helpful. So when you're up on the helmet, you could get the devices to lay down even closer to the helmet. But otherwise, the main thing you'll be doing is locking them in this position here. And then with the bridge, it does have the ability here with this dovetail piece on this bar. This is the dovetail piece that interfaces your mount. So, whether you're using like a Wilcox L4G24 or a Norotos, whatever you're using, this dovetail shoe that interfaces in it, you have the ability by loosening the screw right here, the bigger one, and then you actually take the screw all the way out, and then you can slide the dovetail on the bar here. And what this allows you to do is position the bridge, further away from your face or closer to your face. And so that's useful because depending on the mount that you're using, if you ran out of adjustments in terms of how far you can slide, back and forth from your helmet with the mount, this gives you some extra ability to go even further out or closer in. On the back of the bridge, you've got these knobs and these screws here on the back. And what these are, this is your IPD or interpupillary distance adjustments. So what this allows you to do by rotating these knobs on the screws is it allows you to move these dovetail interfaces. And this is what the dovetails that are attached to your devices go into. And so this is what holds your device up to your eyes. This allows you to move this left and right so you can get it lined up perfectly with your eyes. Some of the other features to the bridge, you see these blue screws here up to the left here of the dovetails. So these are just holders to hold these screws. And then you got some additional backup screws here on the back, and these are just holders that keep the screws in place. But what you can do with these screws is, you remove it from the holder and you stick it here on the other side. And what this allows you to do is, so let's say, you get your device, hooked up here inside the bridge. By taking this screw and sticking it over here and locking it down, it'll keep it from coming out. So even if you press the button, the bridge, the dovetail is not going to release from the mount. In terms of these other screws that you see here, this is just for assembly as far as I know. So by removing the dovetail here, then you can remove these screws, which then allow the arms to separate from each other. And then you got some other ones here on the back side. But those are your main adjustments. One other thing that you have is right here in front of the button that releases the dovetails. You see these little holes. These are set screws. And so you got to take a really tiny Allen. I believe this is a 0.035 Allen. And so you're going to want, an Allen set that goes down this small. But what you can do is actually go in here and actually adjust the tightness with these set screws. And what this allows you to do is essentially make the interface here where the dovetail shoes from your devices go in. You can make this as tight as you want it. And so, when I originally picked up this thing, and I bought all my stuff used, but when I first picked it up, I had a lot of play inside the dovetail interface. And so I really didn't like it. I wasn't sure what to do. Luckily, somebody on Instagram kind of gave me a heads up and told me how to adjust it. And so by going in here and tightening those set screws up, you can make this pretty tight. Now, if you make it too tight, the downside is when you go to move your screws here for your IPD spacing, these will stick. It'll be really hard to move. So you have to find a sweet spot to where you want them at. And if you're not going to be adjusting these a lot, for example, you're going to run a set of PVS-14s and you're not going to switch out devices, you know, once you get it lined up for your eye spacing, I would just go ahead and go in here and tighten those up all the way, so that way it'll be nice and rigid for you. There's one major thing that you need to know about the KVC bridge, and that is when you buy the bridge itself, you know, the Universal Bridge, this piece right here, you don't get any of this other stuff. So the things that you need to actually mount your devices to the bridge, they don't come with it. And so this thing new is, I've seen it anywhere from $750 to about $800 just for the Universal Bridge. And then the other pieces you might need, for example, this set here, this is the OSS shoe set, and this is what's used to mount PVS-14s. These are about $300 new. And then if you want to mount devices that use mum rails, you know, it's like mum 14s, a Breach, you know, other thermal monoculars that use a mum type interface, you got to buy these K Clips, and these are about $200 new. And so they did have a previous version called the M Clip, which I believe operate the same. However, the K Clip is optimized for FLIR Breach. So that's the major thing that you need to know, is that besides buying the Universal Bridge, depending on what you're doing, you're going to need OSS clips or K Clips, and then you got to factor in that additional cost to it. Another thing to know about the KVC bridge is you don't really get very many instructions with it. However, once you're messing with it, you know, it's really not that complicated to figure out. The main thing to know is that the ring goes on your right eye, PVS-14, and then this piece goes on your right eye, PVS-14. So for your left eye 14, it's pretty obvious, you know, with the OSS shoe set, how this thing goes in. This big screw here just goes into the PVS-14 housing. And then obviously you got to orientate the dovetail the correct way to where, you know, how it engages into the mount. On this left eye OSS shoe, this screw right here, I don't even know what this thing does, to be honest with you. So you can see, you know, if you screw it in all the way, you know, it could potentially just fall out of here. It doesn't really go in far enough to engage with the housing, so I'm not sure what this thing's for. So anyways, if you find out, let me know in the comments, but I don't think you really want to touch this thing. In fact, I'd probably just take it out of there, so that way, you know, if the screw did for some reason get loose and you lost it and you turned out you need this for something, that'd kind of suck to lose it. Now with the right eye OSS shoe, this one's pretty straightforward with how it goes on here. You basically just slip it over the objective, you know, with this ring loose, and then once you get it in position, you actually slide this piece over here, just like I show you here, over the housing. You know, when I first got it, I wasn't sure how it lined up, so I had to Google it and look at some photos and see how guys are mounting it. This is how everybody's doing it, and it kind of makes sense because when you have them lined up, the battery knobs, just the way the compartments are, you know, you can kind of see how they line up. And so, anyways, that's how I did it. Now, one thing you can do here is this screw on this one actually does something. So by loosening this up, you can slide this dovetail piece up and down here slightly on this ring, on the arm of this ring. You know, what this allows you to do is line up your 14s so that the back of them are even with the bridge. On these dovetails, you see this little screw right here. So what this does, by loosening it, you can kind of see the, you know, the oblong shape here. So this allows you to move this hook on the back here, I should say on the front part of the dovetail that goes into the mount. You can position this, you know, closer or further away. You know, what this allows you to do is get a proper, you know, secure lockup in the actual dovetail interface that's on the bridge. Now with all these screws on here, it's definitely something that makes sense. Just make it some routine maintenance where you check your screws and make sure stuff's not loose and all that kind of a thing. Once you got the 14s set up here inside the bridge, you know, by making all your adjustments that you might need to, I mean, it's a really rigid setup. I mean, this is a little bit loose because I loosen these things up because I go back and forth between a FLIR Breach and then the 14 on my left eye, and it's just a high quality bridge. I mean, I really like this thing, and the benefit of this bridge and the way you see it with how most guys are running them is that they're running them with a thermal device. So this seems to be the main bridge that guys are using to run skeets on them, breaches, MH25s, and that's mainly because of this IPD spacing. You know, you can get the thermal device lined up evenly with your eye, in addition to the 14. When it comes to mounting a thermal device or something that uses a mum style rail, you're going to have to get these K Clips. And now the K Clips, you know, they're not really marked as far as I can tell which one's left and which one's right. I mean, they say R4 on the back, you know, but they both say R4. So I'm not really sure which one's right or left in terms of what they're supposed to be, but just by looking at them, you know, it kind of makes sense. So this would be your left side, this would be your right side, because as this thing moves in, it's going to be offset slightly to the left. If it was to the right, you could have to play around with it depending on your face shape and your eye spacing, all that kind of stuff. Because for example, if you had to run the right one on the left one or vice versa, I mean, it's who cares how it works as long as it works for you. But the way this thing works is you'll have to loosen the set screw here, and so that way you'll have clearance in this channel, and then you basically just slide this onto your mum rail like this. And then once you get it positioned for where you want it, for me, I found a kind of an off position that doesn't quite go where this thing would go to not damage the rail, but I don't really care. I'm just going to mount it the way I need to. So this is where I position it at. And then the reason I do it this way is it lines up evenly with the PVS-14 on my right eye. The big thing to know is that the set screws, you got to make sure that they're flush. Because if these aren't flush, it's going to hang up inside the dovetail interface and it's not going to lock in all the way. And so that way, if you have that problem and you think it's locked inside the bridge and it's not, you have the potential to drop this thing off the bridge. So definitely make sure that these are flush, and then make sure you get a good positive engagement in the bridge. You can hear it. It makes an audible click when it goes in properly. So for example, I'll put this one in there and you can see, plus the lever pops up, and that's how you know it's locked in there. It's always a good idea just to do a push and pull kind of a thing on it, just to make sure it's not going to come out. All right, so surprisingly, I always figured, I think just from posts I'd seen online about how lightweight this thing is, and it looks lightweight, just from the photos and even looking at it. I mean, this thing looks like it's a super lightweight bridge. But I got the scale set here on ounces, and putting it on the scale, the bridge with the OSS shoes in it for PVS-14s weighs 5.2 ounces, which is actually heavier than the D14 Gen 2 that I have. And so when you compare them side by side, you would think that this D14 would be heavier. It just looks blockier, it looks bigger. But the D14, surprisingly, this one has QD functionality on it. It doesn't have the finer adjustments with IPD distance and stuff like that. But this thing actually weighs less, almost a full ounce at 4.3 ounces. To wrap up the video, I didn't get into super detail, I don't think, about the particulars of the bridge and all the adjustments. I think I showed you everything that I could find on it. Like I said, I didn't really have a manual with it. So if you find something I missed in terms of adjustments or some other stuff on the bridge, let me know in the comments and I'll add it to the video description. I really like this bridge. I think it's pretty awesome. And for the price, I think you get what you need for the price. In particular, the IPD adjustments, that's a really killer feature. Where I see this being of more value is whenever you're switching back and forth between a thermal device and a PVS-14. Having the ability to line them up evenly with your eyes. I think it's a very important feature, and that's where the KVC really plays into that role. Now, if you're just going to run PVS-14s, it does a great job. Definitely with IPD adjustments, you can get these dialed in perfectly. But it is on the more expensive side. The other bridges that don't have these adjustments, you just set your IPD spacing by moving the arms like that. And that works really good. For even some of the more popular goggles out there, DT and VGs, B&V DSGs, they do it the same way, and it's effective. So this isn't necessarily a huge deal when it comes to dual PVS-14s. So if you're looking just for a cost-effective way to mount dual PVS-14s, the KVC is definitely not in that cost-effective category. But if you want a super high-tech bridge that does it with these IPD adjustments, maybe you're going to add a thermal monocular to your setup at some point. I think the KVC is really good for that. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.